Good evening, everyone. Hope you are very well. A lovely sunny evening here in the UK. Spring's finally with us, I think. If you're not in the UK, then welcome to you as well. I know Rolling's not, he's in California. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm your host. I'm Gavin Andrews, the Managing Director of HeartMath in the UK and Ireland. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's presentation, which is all about the Global Consciousness Project 2.0. So by way of a brief sort of intro to all this, for humanity, consciousness is perhaps the most important thing that actually we understand the least about. Well, we all understand what it means to experience consciousness because we're doing it right now, aren't we? It's pretty easy. But while there's lots of different theories from fields of science and philosophy and theology, etc., we just don't know exactly what consciousness is or where it comes from. And in fact, we even have problems defining it. Which then leads to problems with even agreeing on the questions we should be asking about consciousness in our various inquiries. So I'm afraid we're not going to answer the big questions about consciousness this evening, but what we are going to do, though, is to explore how Global Consciousness Project 2.0, or GCP 2.0 for short, headed by the HeartMath Institute, how it's contributing to consciousness research by asking an important question about its nature, or in scientific terms, posing a hypothesis, if you like, and then using scientific instruments, so a global network of quantum random number generators to collect data and then analyze the data, especially in relation to global events and to specific experiments. But GCP2 isn't just about the science. It's about us, it's about humanity, and it's about the potential for our collective consciousness to change our physical world. So that's the intro. That's enough from me. What's much more important is for you to hear from obviously one of the experts and the pioneers. So I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Rollin McCraty. Rollin is Executive Vice President, Head of Research for the HeartMath Institute, and he is one of the GCP2 leadership team. And so Rollin's going to be sharing in much more detail what GCP2 is all about, why it's so important, especially right now, what I think many of us would say is quite a critical time in humanity's evolution. And also the fun bit, which is basically how you can get involved as a citizen scientist or a research participant. So please welcome me in joining Dr. Rollin McCraty. And we'll give him a nice visible, albeit silent, unfortunately, round of applause. And Rollin, sir, welcome and over to you.
Well, thanks, Gavin, and hi, everyone, from wherever you are around the world. I assume most of you are in the UK, Ireland area. I see a few faces that I know aren't, like Meg. Hi, Meg, in Florida and so on. But great to see some new faces here that I don't know, and quite a few that I do recognize. So thanks for coming and listening to this presentation on GCP2. I'm going to just jump in if that's okay, and we'll start doing it, and we'll hopefully have some time for Q&A at the end of this. So let me share the screen here. Looks like Gavin has given me permission to share screen. So let's see. One more thing here. Okay. I finally figured out, after many years of using Zoom, how to share screen and still see all of you. I'm probably a slow learner. So hopefully you're all seeing. I'm going to start by just giving a little context here for GCP2, which is the main focus today, but it's really part of the Global Coherence Initiative. It's kind of the umbrella organization that's doing this. And so GCI, as we refer to it for short. God, I forget how many years ago, 17, maybe 15, 17, that we started this. And it's a science-based co-creative project, as you can see here. And it's really all about ultimately uniting people in heart-focused love and intention to facilitate the shift in global consciousness, the baseline of global consciousness. I think we can arguably, probably all agree that it's fairly unstable right now, and a lot of discord going on. And that we certainly can use some more compassionate care and more cooperation and getting along with each other, and certainly increasing peace in the world. So that's really what this has always been about. And okay, so all right, GCI overview. There's just a couple main high-level hypotheses, I guess, to keep my science hat on here. This first one is not a hypothesis in any way. Basically we're saying here that the Earth is constantly bathed in electromagnetic fields. Um, Certainly no doubt about that. We live within fields, nested fields. For example, the magnetic field of the Earth, and then the Earth itself is within the magnetic field of the sun. And so and within the Earth, there are multiple types of fields. I'll say a little bit more about that. And secondly, what we're suggesting here, and I'm not the first to suggest this, but I certainly agree with it, that these fields that we live within connect all living organisms on Earth. Certainly us, but trees, plants, whales, elephants, all living systems, nature, you can think of that way, are all interconnected via these fields. So basically, we're all living in these common vibrational fields. And to extend the second statement here, there's no question that we are affected by the magnetic field environment of the Earth. There are literally, I've got a stack of papers over here on one of my counters that's about yay high of research that's showing this, many studies showing, and we especially don't like our physiology and our mental emotional worlds do not like it when the fields of the Earth are disturbed. There's all kinds of negative things happen, more hospital admissions, we get a little edgier, quicker to react and get triggered, and more traffic accidents, and the list goes on and on. So we like coherent field environment that we live in. But what I'm also suggesting is that it's a two-way street. Not only are we affected by these fields, but we feed information, I'll call it, into a global field, information field, as I like to refer to it. So we're all contributing positive or negative vibrations into the field based on our thoughts, but especially our feelings, and the quality of the interactions we have, and so on. So it's kind of a two-way street, if you will. And we're always connected to the field. I'd like to make that point, not just when we come together to do, heart focus meditations or big events, but 24/7. We're feeding that into the field. So it's the totality of humanity kind of makes up the balance of what that field, the information is in that field. And if that's true, and I think I'm going to show some evidence here today that it actually is true, that when we come together, a lot of people come together, especially in heart-centered states of love and compassion, we create a more coherent field environment. We pulse the field, feed the field. There's an amplification effect that creates those vibrations throughout the whole global field. And that helps lift others, helps benefit others, and all living systems in the field when we do that. Okay, so what are our tools scientifically to answer those questions? Prove or disprove it. So the first project for GCI was the Global Coherence Monitoring System, and a lot of you probably are familiar with that. That this is a global network of magnetometers that are ultra sensitive, that are specifically designed to measure the vibrations, what we call resonant frequencies in the magnetic fields of Earth. I'm not going to go into a lot because that's here on that, but just to know that there's two primary ones that are quite powerful that we're living in. One is, we have the geomagnetic field. We all know what that is, right? The North Pole, the South Pole. One of the things that I didn't learn until actually way later in my career, and I was even a communication engineer, right? Used to work for Motorola, using these magnetic fields to carry information around. But here's the thing, that magnetic field lines, which you can see, back in the experiment we all probably did back in science class, when you dump the iron filings on a glass plate, you put the magnet under it and they kind of jump around and show you the shape of the field, whether it's a bar magnet or a horseshoe, whatever. But remember, those little particles, iron filings, line up in parallel lines next to each other. So that simple little experiment lets us visualize magnetic field lines. Okay, so they're real things. But here's the thing, you can pluck them like a guitar string and they vibrate. So that's what we're measuring, is the vibrations, the vibrating, not the strength of the field, but the vibrations in it. So just like in our guitar, or really any string instrument, the length of the string and how much tension there is determines its frequency, its note, right? we'd call it C or E in musical scales, but we talk about it in frequency. So magnetic field lines are very long of Earth, so they have a very low note or frequency. And it's kind of amazing that nobody put the dots together before we created the global coherence monitoring system. And the term for this is called field line resonances, right? This has been known for a long time, but nobody had put it together that they're the same. The primary resonant frequency of the vibrating field lines of Earth, which is the strings are plucked by the solar wind coming by and plucking them and vibrating, is the same frequency as our heart rhythm when we're in a heart coherent state. Imagine that. I mean, literally, when we're in a heart rhythm coherent state, we're oscillating at the same frequency as the primary resonant frequency of Earth. Okay, then there's a second set of magnetic rhythms called Schumann resonances that overlap our brain waves. So we are living in an environment that's the same frequency as our hearts and brains, which is also true for most animals, by the way, as well. All right, so not to go into a lot more there. Then the newest addition to our toolbox is the Global Consciousness Project 2.0, which we're going to focus on mostly. So I'll say that. Then another part of this is the tools is the global tree monitoring system. I suspect a few of you might, or some of you might even be hosts for hooking your trees up. I don't know, around the world here. Then this gives us, as I said, all living systems are interconnected by the field. So trees make great research participants. They stay put, they don't run off, and they really don't mind if we put a couple of electrodes in them to monitor their electrical activities. And trees have amazingly dynamic electrical lives, circadian rhythms and dynamics that we're still trying to sort out. So this is a relatively new project that, in fact, this year we're going to be focusing more on starting to actually analyze the data. Till now, it's been getting the trees around the world, and we're getting close to 100 trees all around the world hooked up. And this is truly new basic research. Nobody's ever even thought of doing something like this before. There's very little research on the electrical lives of trees. And then another tool in the toolbox is the Global Coherence app, which hopefully most of you already have and are using regularly. This lets us measure the people. How coherent are you? Because one of our research questions, well, I'll get to that. I'm going to not comment here, but so we can see where you are and how many people are involved and what's our collective coherence that we're adding to the field. And then use that data to look to see the changes in these other measures. And then, of course, as Gavin, you alluded to, the most important part is you, right? The community, creating heart connections, and doing, in this case, organized experiments to really add love and compassion to the field. And so we can see what happens when we do that. Okay, so GCP 2.0, which is our main topic today. Well, let's get into it. One clicker. Okay, so the GCP2 is we collect a lot of data in this experiment, but it's really an experiment designed to study how should say collective human consciousness, which is reflected in what we are paying attention to and how we feel about it, correlates with changes in the physical world as measured by the devices that we use in the Global Consciousness Project. So you can think of this as a globally distributed scientific instrument that's all interconnected. And what these devices are technically called random number generators. And basically, the simple way to think of an RNG, a random number generator, is as an electronic coin flipper. Now, it's actually very hard to make them, but at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. They are creating, instead of heads or tails, it's a series of ones or zeros, kind of like you see here in random. And to truly be a random device like this, it means that you cannot predict the future based on the past data. There's no patterns or ways that you can predict the future from the past. And even though it's pretty simple what they do, flip coins really fast in this case, it's actually really hard to make a random number generator. And the process we use to create this randomness is called quantum tunneling. And basically what we do is we try and make an electron go through a barrier it doesn't want to go through. And some, through a truly quantum process, jump through it, tunnel through it. And then we count how many electrons made it through. And that's a completely unpredictable random process. and probably has something to do with the mechanisms of how this all works, but we don't really know that yet. So we know that when if you ever tried this, you take a coin and flip it 100 times or however many times, on average, you're going to come out 50 heads, 50 tails, right? However, you might flip that coin and you might get 8, 10, sometimes even heads in a row or tails. And that's the same thing is true in an RNG, although on average, they're going to come out 50-50. And that's kind of an important point that I'll get to set up the thing here. So in GCP2, we've designed completely new next generation random number devices. And each one of these devices, I'm going to call it RNGs, actually has 4 independent random number generators. So you're getting 4 devices. I mean, 4 of these RNGs on each one. And so that's what they look like. They're pretty cool. I don't know. I get longer cords so I can hold mine up. Do you have yours handy, Gavin? I don't know if you can hold it up or not.
I can't hold it up, but it's in the
Okay.
background there. I don't know if people can see it. Yeah, I can't hold it up though. Sorry.
Well, I can maybe get mine. I got to get this dealt with, so I get longer cords. Mine on my desk here. Yeah, you can see that. So you can see they're very thin, cool LEDs that change colors and based on what the network's doing and things. So they're pretty small. So basically, we are distributing these guys all around the planet. Now, here's what the cool thing. And this is what we call network coherence. So you see the symbols up there for the little devices, and then there's 4 streams of numbers. It's because there's 4 independent random number generators. And I know this is kind of a complicated looking slide, but it's pretty simple. The point I'm trying to make here is when we talk about high network coherence, what this means that these devices that are around the world, hundreds, thousands of miles apart often, start flipping ones or zeros at the same time. And they start doing this above and beyond what you could ever find through just normal random behavior. Because sometimes you'll find that, but not a lot. And then in very low, you can just see over on the right, they're all just all over the place. There's no correlated behavior. Now, of course, I'm exaggerating it here on so you see where all the ones are going across or zeros at the same time. Just to illustrate the point, that's what we would say as high network coherence. Okay, makes sense, hopefully. All right, now here's a little history. So as we now lovingly refer to it, GCP1, the original Global Coherence Project, was started by Roger Nelson at Princeton University. And just to give you a little background there, it was a pair lab, it was called, pretty famous history there. And they were doing a lot of experiments to ask the question, can human consciousness or energetic consciousness, put it that way, affect the physical world? And they did a lot of cool experiments at Princeton back then. And basically the answer was yes, we can interact and affect the physical world. But one of the devices that they were trying out during that era of all the different things they did was random number generators. And they were asking questions like, can we intentionally cause them to make more ones or zeros, right? And they did many, many, many studies. And basically the answer was yes, especially people who had backgrounds in meditation and can focus and things like this. Well, that led Roger to the idea of the Global Consciousness Project. He said, well, what if we put a lot of these around the world, and time synchronize their data and send them all back to a central place, a central server, and look at the network. And his hypothesis is that when large events, global events that get a lot of people to be paying attention and feel something, that you might see an effect on this, the behavior of these devices. And so he spent about 17 years, I guess, doing this formally. And so it was a very, very rigorous formal experiment. In the 500 of the events that I'm showing you the data from here were what he called formal events. And what that means to be a formal event is that it was registered publicly before the event happened. Or basically, this is how we're going to analyze the data. This is what kind of things we'll look at. And these are the statistics we'll use. And then you report the outcome no matter what happens. Okay. But then there are also many hundreds of other events that weren't formal events because an earthquake, you can't predict when that's going to happen necessarily, or or these types of many types of things. Here's the results of the 500 formal events. And the statistics are over 1,000,000,000,000 to 1 odds against chance that the network is measuring a real effect from these global events. And probably the most famous one is 9/11, the terrorist attacks on the trade towers, but death of Princess Diana, large-scale meditations, many of these types of events were looked at. So something very real is happening. Over 1,000,000,000 to 1 statistics is kind of more than hit the ball out of the ballpark. I mean, this is unquestionable that something real is happening here. And the way to look at this graph is that you see down at the bottom where it says 0, the dotted line. That's what you would expect by chance across these events. It should be if nothing was happening, the red line would just be dancing around the black line. And then the different colored lines of the different significance levels, statistically speaking. So we see the red line is just way off the chart there, showing the cumulative effect of all these events. Now, here's my favorite thing that Roger did from this data set was he then had them rated for the level of love and compassion evolved in the event. So high love and compassion, Global Peace Day, right? Or large organized meditation events to the world, these types of events. And then the medium category, these would be events that evoke a lot of emotion, because we know that's the key factor here, but don't necessarily have much love and compassion. Super Bowls, World Cups, big sporting events, things like this. A lot of emotion, right, going on. And then the low category, these are things like terrorist attacks, shootings that get a lot of media attention, and so on. And it's, I think, quite important to see here that those events that have a high tone or quality of love and compassion have a significantly greater impact on creating this coherence in the global network of devices. Okay, which kind of makes sense if you think about it. When we're more loving, more coherent, we're more coherent. We can measure that. We're radiating a more coherent field. We can measure that and analyze that. And all this is published, which I'm suggesting increases our coupling to the planetary field environment, which then the devices are picking up. Okay. All right. So when Roger, basically, Dr. Nelson approached me probably 3 years ago now, and said, I'm really retiring now for real, selling his house in Princeton and moving to another community with his kids and things, and to hang out with grandkids and so on. And would you take it over? And to be honest, I resisted for at least a year and said, no, Roger, there's other people. Why don't you ask so-and-so? And he said, no, Rollin, it's got to be you. So it's quite an honor, actually. But we spent then a good year with a team of scientists from around the world, including Roger and some folks at IONS, Dean Radin, and people that had been involved in GCP1 for, since the beginning, and some new people. And, really said, okay, what have we learned from GCP1? And dug in on it, did a lot more types of analysis to ask even more questions about what we can learn from the data. And then the discussion turned to, well, what would we like to ask now? What are the questions? What are the remaining scientific questions? And then what would it take to address those? And what we realized was it was going to take a completely new version and vision of this project, and that's GCP 2.0. So it's completely redesigned, rebuilt from the ground up, including the new devices that I showed you. Because, for example, one of the limitations, what we found in looking at the well, that's coming up in the next slide, but I'll go ahead and tell you anyway, is that the number of devices, detectors, if you will, in the network was related to the sensitivity of detecting these events in the global field environment. So anyway, we came up with new questions that we wanted to ask, like, for example, a hypothesis in GCP 2.0 is that a much smaller group of people who are heart coherent and have a shared intention might have as large or even larger effect than masses, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who are kind of scattered, because I saw something on the media and feeling something about it, which is mostly what GCP1 looked at. Are there distance effects? Are their effects stronger locally than globally? For example, there can be something that happens locally in a country that's really important to those people in that country, but the rest of the world didn't even hear about. A great example of that came up somewhat recently in Germany. A lot of you probably being in Europe probably know about what I'm talking about, all the demonstrations and things about, like, I forget the details now, but I guess they were wanting to throw out the non-Germans out of the country or something. Somebody did, and there was this big revolt against it, and there were hundreds of thousands of people marching and stuff, which we were made aware of through one of the hosts, and actually did find some significant effects on that. That'd be an example of that. Does intention matter? Right? These are new questions these are questions that couldn't be addressed in GCP1. And what's the mechanism that causes the network to correlate with human emotions? That's unknown. We have theories, right? But nobody really knows. And so in the GCP2, we've added a whole lot of data streams, and I won't get into all the details. Going up to the server is far more complex, including the number of electrons coming through that barrier, right? Is our consciousness really affecting them at a quantum level in that quantum tunneling? That's a question we can now start to ask. And that was the last one down there. Okay. So this is what I already mentioned, that what we found from the GCP1 data is that the more devices in the network, that's the graph on the right side, shows a direct correlation between the sensitivity to detect the effect. GCP1 at its maximum had about 70 devices in the global network. We're going for 1,000. And then each of the devices has 4 RNGs, so to be a total of 4,000 RNGs. So we really believe and hope that this is going to greatly increase our sensitivity to measure the effects of our collective, or you could think of as extended consciousness, in that global consciousness field. And you hear me referring to it as a field, a global consciousness field, because I'll say it's a metaphor that the research team likes to think of it in, and but there's some new analysis that one of our new team members is just doing that is indicating that may not just be an analogy. It really may be that way. Of already that we're starting to see, because in the GCP2 data, that there's these waves going through the global field. So you can kind of think of this. One way to think is when you have low network coherence. If you think of rubber ducks or buoys on the ocean, they're all bouncing around randomly, right? Choppy seas. And then when we have a coherent wave or high network coherence, you've got these big waves, kind of coherent waves going through. So the rubber ducks are going up and down together at the same time. Because hoping that kind of gives you a visual picture of what we think we're seeing and measuring. Okay, so that's our goal. All right, so here's some of the more recent results from GCP2 to show you some. This is the beginning 24 hours of the Hamas-Israel disagreements, war if it's going on. And so you can see there was a significant effect there. So we included the 24 hours because this is the attack Hamas did, and then Israel's beginning responses on that as well. And this is consistent with what we would expect to see with these kinds of things from GCP1. And again, if the red line goes above the blue line, that means it was significant. Because typically normal behavior is kind of around up and down around 0, like you see over on the right in the control period. Now, interestingly, this is one of my favorite results so far, one of several. And we did agreed to do a little kind of project with the producer that made the movie called The One Field. Some of you might be familiar with that movie. And they've created kind of a following of the movie and doing these regular experiments to engage that community. And here's what happened. This all happened long before the start of the conflict. And this is the producer happens to live in Israel of the movie. And it was going to be a 7-month experiment where once a month we did these guided collective heart meditations. And they always had the same intention, which was to add love and compassion to the planetary field, to help shift or raise the baseline consciousness of humanity. That was always the intention. And they were also using the Global Coherence app. Well, not everybody, but we're strongly encouraging them to, so we could actually get a measure of the coherence levels of the groups and the people. And it was supposed to be over the 7 months. But what happened is the war started. So we kind of shifted gears, and so we did an analysis of the first 6 months, which was significant on the global field, but that's not what I'm showing you here. Then on the 7th one, they organized kind of the big event, which was an in-person group in an auditorium in Jerusalem. And then we had a couple thousand people online watching this. And I actually had the honor, you could call it, of leading this particular meditation. And here's the result. So what we see here is right as the meditation begins, you see the data shift and go way up out of the envelope. So this is one of our first indications that the first hypothesis, that a much smaller heart coherent group with a shared intention can have a large effect. Now this is kind of great because they'd had a lot of practice, right? 6 months of practicing with the app and getting coherent and with the shared intention. So it can't get much better than this when you see these kind of results on the global field. So I mean, a couple thousand people. This is really tiny when you think about GCP1, which are hundreds of thousands, millions of people involved. Okay. So now, of course, an N of 1 doesn't mean much. You got to repeat things a bunch of times to have a scientific meaning. Well, here's another similar repeat of this. And this was fairly recent on 3/17, and I was invited to attend this conference. It was called the Global Spirituality Festival, basically, is how that translates to Mahavesto. It was organized by the government of India, that brought together spiritual leaders from all over the world to basically trying to get the world's spiritual leaders and religions to kind of becoming more accepting of each other, and try to kind of work. The theme of it was from inner peace to world peace of this conference. So there was a time that we did a collective meditation there. There's about 40,000 people in person. They're in the largest meditation center in the world, hosted at the Heartfulness Institute, and then about another 20,000 online at this time. So almost exactly the same kind of results. Way more people, but they were also pretty somewhat familiar with heart coherence. It is the Heartfulness Institute, so a lot of them were practices of heart-focused meditations. And again, we see a very, very similar pattern right after the meditation begins. A nice big increase in this. So again, still a relatively small group, much bigger than the first one, but still pretty small. This may be more relevant to us in the U.S. I don't know, but after the Super Bowl, Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl, and they had a big celebration to greet the players when they came back. And there was estimated over 1 million people were in this, watching this giant parade in Kansas City, Missouri. And unfortunately, at towards the end of it was one of those all too frequent shootings that goes on, which created a lot of panic and confusion and so on. And so here we're seeing that the parade itself, 1 million people involved, had a significant effect on the global network. And then you see the 1:50 p.m. is when the shooting occurred, and that's, if you analyze that event, that's also significant. So we saw that impact in the field. Okay. Now this is a little different because we also can do what we call field studies, where we have what we call a tower of devices. So it's 10 of these stacked devices, so 40 RNGs. That can be taken to events like a concert or a meditation event. In this case, it was a lot of you probably know Joe Dispenza has these large events that usually have 1,500 to 2,000 people attending them, and they do on 3 of the days they do what they call coherence healings. And so we've been looking at a bunch of those events with him. He has his own tower. He takes to all the events. And so we see here that on the first day, not a significant effect, but there was on the last 2 days. You know, a lot of these this particular event are mostly new people that come to, so they're learning and practicing. So we saw the effect locally there, and it's kind of neat that we can do that. And the tower is getting requested a lot these days for different events. But here's where it gets more interesting. Now, we've done this twice now, where we had the tower of 40 RNGs at the event, and then but also looking at the global network. When at this time we had 700 RNGs in the network, and what we're seeing here is this pattern where the local data and the global data have the same basic pattern. So this is kind of getting interesting, right? So, you know, could it be that the local group and the significant field effect they're creating locally is also radiating out to a global effect? We'll see. You know, if this keeps happening, repeating, then I think we could make a case for that. It's a little bit too soon to make too many claims here, but we are seeing this in more than one case. Okay, so this is very much a citizen scientist-based project. And the GCP2 website, there's a number of ways that we look and show at the data. So there's one of the displays is what you kind of see here, the globe. It's a spinning globe. Of course, this is a static picture. And all those colored dots you see, that's where a device is located. And one of the first level of coherence we measure means there's 4 RNGs on the device. We can look at what's the coherence or the correlated behavior of those 4 devices. I mean, of those 4 RNGs on that local device. And that's what the colors of these dots are showing, is the coherence. And kind of interesting, we never intended it this way, but I get all kinds of emails now from people who are hosts who are talking about, yeah, I'm inviting my friends over and we're doing heart lock-ins and meditations and looking at the map to see if our device changes and things. So, and a lot of that's going on, and people reporting, you know, at least anecdotally, a lot of cool stuff that it seems like they're linked, you know, to the device somehow. So that would be the first level. And then over on the right, this is another display on the website that's showing the coherence of the global network. You know, so you can kind of see where the pointer is right now. And when it was in the elevated state, and it's real time. You can go to the website and see what both the local device level is and the global network. Now, to address some of the other questions like local versus global effects and distance effects, one of the new designs in GCP2 is we're creating what we're calling clusters. Cluster cities or cluster areas. And these are where we are putting 20 of these of the GCP2 devices in a fairly small area. And then so we're also able to analyze those devices in that cluster. So we've got the device level coherence, cluster level coherence, and then the global network level coherence. So they change colors depending upon the coherence on this map on the website. So on the right are the cluster areas or cities. Most of them are large population density cities because we know this has to do with people's consciousness. But we also want some that are in you know, more spiritually relevant areas like Mecca, for example, would be an example of that. And the ones that have the red stars on them, that just means that an external funder has funded those clusters. So for hosts that don't have to pay for one, that want to host one in those areas. Madrid is actually full now. It's the first fully complete cluster to be done. And London is one of the clusters. And so any of you living in London, there's a lot of space left for devices. Now it's half of the network. The other half is just randomly distributed. So you don't have to be in a cluster to participate as a citizen scientist. You can really be anywhere, but especially if you live in one of the cluster areas, we would love to invite you to consider being a host. The citizen scientist host. Let's see if I can get my clicker to advance. Okay. So basically, the invitation here is become a citizen scientist. Especially if you're interested in things like consciousness and global consciousness and helping shift the baseline consciousness of the planet. We do prefer, doesn't have to be, but hosts that that are interested in that topic and who kind of create what Roger Nelson calls a consciousness or an intention contract with the devices. He says it works best when people fall in love with the devices. You make that connection to them because we really think it's reflecting more of the people and the host than anything. That's yet to be proven, but that is certainly my belief. So that's my invitation for those of you here if you want to be a host of a device. And I think, Gavin, you said you have I might have a slide on how to apply, but it doesn't make sense here that you should probably show yours.
Yeah, we'll do it at the end, Rollin. Don't worry, I'll share all of that.
Yeah. So I'm going to end it there. And
oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, just on what Rollin was saying, that actually interestingly, Rollin, as you were talking about that, and people sending intentions to their own random number generators. I'm just looking at the map of London, and mine's showing high level coherence, which may be
believe that
coincidental.
or not. I mean,
It's true. I mean, you won't be able to see it very clearly on here, but I am. You can't see that very well at all. But I'm the little yellow dot that's peeking out there from the pink dot. So
yeah. By the way, you can find your device, or each one has a number, but you can also nickname your device so it shows up when you put your cursor over the dots on the map. It shows your nickname or the device number, so you can find yours. But, I just called mine Rollin, but so you can find mine.
I need to call mine something because it's just got a number at the moment. So yeah, guys, as Rollin was saying, you can get involved by hosting your own RNG. So let me just share a slide with some details on that. Where are we? There we go. Okay, cool. So we have some in the UK. Up till now, you were having to get them from the US, and that was causing all sorts of added hassle with things like importing and import duty and that type of thing. So we've actually got 20 here at the moment. I'm very happy to get more, but we've got 20 for now. And if you are interested in hosting one of these RNGs in your home, over there, or your office, or your educational establishment, or wherever, it doesn't matter where it is, then we're selling these. We just want the cost covered. We're not making any money on these at all. They're very sophisticated devices and they're not cheap to manufacture. But if you want one, they're £275. So if you're in the UK, that includes the VAT and the postage. And if you are elsewhere, EU or the rest of the world, depending where you are in the rest of the world, it might make more sense to get it from the US. But in the first instance, reach out to me. Certainly in Europe, reach out to me. The price would be £245 because we don't need to charge the VAT, obviously. And that will include the postage, global tracked postage as well. But just to clarify for you, if you're outside of the UK, you will have to pay import duty at your local tax rates, whatever that is, 20%, 23%, or whatever it might be. So the total cost will probably end up being nearer the 275 that it is in the UK. So look, if you're interested in having one of these, just reach out to me at info@heartmath.co.uk. Or if that's just not feasible or viable at the moment, then there are other ways to participate in the project. As we go on, time goes on, there'll be organized meditations and experiments and those types of things. So just go to gcp2.net/join. So I'll put this in the chat as well, and you can sign up then and get information on news and events and that type of thing. So there's the opportunity there to become a citizen scientist, should you wish.